party is over, and now they're walking around wondering who's the one who has to do the cleanup, who has to wash that vomit out of that carpet.
So hello, welcome to All Four Quarters, your one-stop shop for news, views and overreactions to all things NFL. Have we just spent the last 6 hours in the queue trying to get tickets for Dublin? You bet we have. So hey, we got Connor here, we've got Ronan.
Hello.
And we got Sean.
Hello.
How are we getting on, lads? How are we feeling? We'll just get it out there, square and centre. No tickets for us for the Dublin game. Sad times.
Well, what I'm annoyed about is that we got people in. Like, we had people in the queue. We did the thing you're supposed to do. We had multiple laptops, and everyone had an account, and we were sitting there waiting for 3.5 hours, and we got 2 people actually got in while there were tickets available that we wanted, and the system screwed it up. Like, that's the thing that's going to go on and haunt me about this, is that we had managed to play the lottery, and essentially we had won what we wanted, but then the system wouldn't give it to us. That's the thing that's what annoys me about this whole thing.
Shout out to
Ticketmaster.
Shout out to Cian for being the one who pulled that lucky straw and actually got through, and then Ticketmaster screwed him over. Yeah, it was it's a terrible interface as well. Ticketmaster is just a terrible company. Please don't sponsor us.
Or sponsor us if you want us to
give us
say
tickets
nice
and we'll
things
say
about
everyone that you're great. Like, yeah. But yeah, it was a bit frustrating. The amount of random people that text me today going, "Here, are you guys getting tickets for this?" I just saw it on the news. Apparently, like, everyone else is now aware of how much of a ball ache this was for us. But yes, so Sean, how is all down in Cork?
Yeah, not too bad. It's been an eventful last few months, which I won't go into too much detail, but no, the sun is shining, which it hasn't done for a while now, and got a friend's wedding next week, so we get to see people and hang out, and that would be good. And then I am making progress with the publication of my novel, which is a thing that I might give more details at the appropriate time. So things are not too bad at the moment. Not too bad, all things considered.
It's a romance book about Belichick and Tom Brady.
Yeah, and how the usurping 24-year-old woman gets in the way.
Yeah. It's called The Patriot Way. Yeah, good. How about yourself, Ronan? How's all down in Cork? You're coming out of a busy period of work.
Yeah, we had a new release coming up, had to kick a few things around, make stuff work, but got it over the line there just recently. So yeah, that's going out, and then I'll be busy kind of marketing it for the various channels that we have for that, one-to-one demos, etc. But yeah, I've been busy, but yeah, hopefully looking at the rest of the summer being a bit more reliable, a bit easier, and start getting my fantasy prep in, because we obviously have that one league where we'll be doing fantasy drafting in the middle of July, which is always an interesting experience.
I'm going to have to start doing my prep for that myself, actually.
Yeah, well, that's it's a kind of positive externality of doing these previews that we're doing from here on out for the rest of the summer, that you'll get some prep in for free, as it were.
That's it. It'll be we can bury some nuggets in here, safe in the knowledge that no one will usurp us in the fantasy football, because no one will listen that late into the episode when we say, well, this seventh string wide receiver, I think he's really got a chance. Very good. Well, it's been a minute since we were talking to listeners, so we've got a bit of news to go through. This week we are going to look at the AFC East in our previews, and we'll go team by team, look at what they've added, subtracted, question marks going into the season, what we think might happen, and give you our kind of predictions. Boy howdy as well, I found the doing the full season predictions was tough this year. There's a few moving pieces, and like there's moments where I was like, I'm through 9 weeks now, I should probably guess that one of these quarterbacks is injured and swapping, so they're going to lose the next couple of games. So it's good wish casting, a good kind of exercise for this late out. But we have rosters starting to solidify, and we'll be going through them one by one. We'll talk about a few bits of news that have impacted that. Up the top, New Orleans do not have a quarterback at the moment, or rather they don't have Derek Carr anymore. He's retired after 11 seasons. He cited ongoing degenerative shoulder issue as the reason for why he's going. Obviously there was a lot of reports around him being unhappy in New Orleans, and we were discussing, I think, on the last episode about whether or not this was a play to try and get himself out of the contract. So Derek has eaten a lump of money. So he's basically said, you can have back some of the money that I will be owed because he's retiring, but it will free up his rights as a free agent. So should he, as I think there is a chance, decide after a year of rest and relaxation and not getting the crap kicked out of him, he might come back next season and say, do you know what, actually I do have a little bit more left in the tank. But he finishes with 4 Pro Bowls, which honestly surprised me. 41,000 yards, 257 touchdowns, 112 interceptions. Never really got a huge amount of success on field. I think he only played in one playoff game, which they lost. There's always going to be a question mark about that one season where he played really well and then got injured just before the playoffs and wasn't there, and then never really came back fully after it. But just kind of a middling career overall. Kind of mostly most of the big moments are kind of not great, like interception in that playoff game against the Bengals and so on. But yeah, look, they're going to have rookie second rounder Tyler Slaw will compete against Spencer Rattler, who we saw a bit of last year, and Jake Hayner for the starting role in New Orleans. It kind of adds more question marks to that team, and we'll be getting into that in a couple of weeks when we get into the NFC side of previews. But yeah, like, any strong feelings about Derek Carr retiring? I think it makes the question mark of who is the most average quarterback in the NFL a little bit more difficult to answer.
The Carr line has been erased.
Yeah.
No, I mean Derek Carr's career is one of those situations where the numbers do lie. Where you look at the 4 Pro Bowls and 41,000 yards, and he's got a 2-to-1 TD to interception ratio. And if you knew nothing about football, you'd be like, that sounds like a pretty decent career. But people who've watched it realize that he never achieved the things at the important moments. He never stepped up in a playoff game and did what had to be done. He never dragged a team to a good seed, except for that one season early on where he got injured. So he will be remembered as a mediocre guy who never lived up to himself. Better than his brother, I suppose, is the thing that he can kind of hang his hat on, but not much other than that. And if it's a shoulder that's gone, I mean, I'm just thinking about the start of last year when his long throws were like the one thing the Saints had going as an offensive weapon, and it took a while for teams to react to that. If his shoulder is gone and he doesn't have that, then his passing range is limited. He might actually be a worse quarterback if he decides to come back. So giving up the 30 mil is an interesting decision. Is it a principal thing? I'm trying to help the team, or as you say, is it I want to keep my options open to coming back? But for the Saints, better start thinking about who might actually be your quarterback, because these 3 guys, none of them were NFL caliber. Well, maybe the rookie might prove to be one day, but I think we've seen enough of Spencer Rattler to know he's not going to be the guy who saves this franchise.
Yeah, like I think if Derek Carr is remembered, which I don't, he doesn't really feel like someone who's going to be long in the memory. He didn't even have the kind of studied mediocrity of an Andy Dalton to kind of stick you in his memory with all those playoff failures. And yeah, like there is obviously a lot of bad luck for Derek Carr. He played for the Raiders at a time when that team sucked, basically, for the vast majority of his time there. Went through a whole bunch of coaching changes, some of them optional, some of them enforced by stupid stuff happening in the background. But yeah, for Derek Carr, like he was a fine quarterback, a high end trailer. Not someone who's going to drag your team, kicking and screaming into the Super Bowl. But someone, if you had put a good team around him, definitely could have went to the Super Bowl. Like someone in that kind of Jimmy Garoppolo, Andy Dalton, Jared Goff type category. He's been above and below those kind of guys over his career, but I think he's definitely in that kind of broad area if you average it out. So yeah, I think he's he's a fine player. He was luckier than his brother, who may or may not have been good because he was put on that Texans team. Basically got absolutely killed, so never had a chance, as it were. So yeah, like I think not a career that'll live long in the history books. For the Saints, we'll talk more this in the preview, but yeah, not a great position to be, but in some ways actually not that bad a position. They got a bunch of money back on the contract end. That means they have the opportunity, if they so wish to potentially get out of cap hell. However, the moves that they made don't suggest that they're going to do that. They're just going to put this Tyler Shook, the rookie they picked in the second round, who a lot of reports indicate was the chosen one from Kellen Moore, the new head coach, and see if they can make it work and just still put a load of veterans in there, even though their cap situation is still absolutely rotten. But yeah, as you say, the giving the money back, perhaps somewhat self-motivated, because as you say, That makes if he does come back, while the Saints will retain his rights, there wouldn't be an issue with the cap if they then traded him effectively. So they can make that numbers work quite well after that if they traded him away for whatever they could get for him, or if they cut him as well. So yeah, I think for Derek Carr, he's retiring, but would I be that surprised if like 6 months from now or for a year from now he came back and played for a contender that was desperate for a QB like the fucking Steelers? Wouldn't surprise me that much. So we may not have heard the last of Derek Carr. Whether that final act will be more memorable than the rest of his career, probably not.
Yeah. We had an NFL meeting where a couple of rule changes were debated and discussed. The tush push has survived just by 2 votes, so we will be seeing the tush push next year. The NFL playoff seeding proposal was tabled, so this was the one that we talked about previously to make it based on winning record rather than the divisional winners necessarily getting an automatic home game. Onside kick changes mean that you can now do it if you're behind at any point and the team gets to start a yard closer. So that, as you'll remember, this was discussed where it got moved to having to be called and having to be in the fourth quarter and having to be X, Y, and Z. And they've now said, look, if you're behind, you can do it. I believe it still needs to be announced. The NFL players are now going to be allowed to play in the flag football, or we're going to be allowed to compete for a spot on the team in the flag football for the Olympics in 2028. They've added a Protector of the Year award for best offensive lineman, and we now know that Buffalo are going to be the team on Hard Knocks, and the NFC East is going to be the in-season Hard Knocks. Anything on that you want to jump and chat about? We talked about some of this on a previous pod, but
yeah, like I think the tush push, obviously, was a big push, if you pardon the pun, from I think Green Bay in particular to get this over the line. I think the player safety committee and the competition committee came out in favour of banning the tush push, or more accurately, banning all pushing on both sides of the ball, which I think was the standard many years ago. But it managed to win, and the conversation that came out about why the teams who chose not to vote for it were all pretty much the same, which is like they said, well, like, they've come up with something good. They do it better than other teams. Not everyone's like, this isn't something that everyone's just doing for free across the league. So it's our job to figure this out and make this a non-viable play for the Eagles going forward. And it's like fair enough. I completely see that argument. And to be fair, the data used by the player safety committee was mostly hypothetical. They basically said like there's a chance you could have a very bad injury in this play. We think there's enough evidence there that we should take the precautionary principle. But as anyone who studies EU law knows, the precautionary principle is not for US people. That's for EU people who are pansies, of course, in legal terms. But yeah, like look, NFL playoff seeding, I think that kind of it kind of knew that was going to die pretty quickly from Detroit, so that they ended up tabling that. The onside kicks changes are very minimal. Basically, you can now do it whenever you want, which I think is an improvement over having to do it in the fourth quarter and then moving it 1 yard closer. So there's like, you might adjust that probably success from, I think it was like 2 or 3%, 4% up to like, I think they're probably aiming for something in the kind of 5 to 10% range. I think 1 in 20 to 1 in 10 chance of succeeding. We'll see if that works. 1 yard at a time. Eventually they might calibrate it to where they want it to be. The Olympics thing I think was pretty much already confirmed, but good to see. I think we obviously want to see that. Now a whole bunch of debate from the actual US flag players. They're like, no, these guys aren't as good as us. Trust us. Like, we could totally outplay like Jamar Chase or whoever. We're totally as athletic as them. It's like, yeah, we'll see. There'll be some interesting triads there. The OL award I think makes sense. I think I think that's something that makes sense because obviously offensive lineman never wins any of the actual MVP or offensive player of the year award, so it makes sense to have something that's just for them, so they can get recognized. And then the hard knock stuff, we'll see how good that is. With the loss of the off-season one, which is the only good one really last year, I felt like they're probably going back to the safe and nice approach to it. I don't think there'll be too much controversy in either of these after what happened with the off-season one with the Giants last off-season.
Sorry, just on the tush push, I'm very firmly of the opinion that it being a successful play is not a reason to get rid of it. And the safety stuff maybe you can look at, but I suspect most teams wanted to ban it because they couldn't stop it. And that is the wrong principle to be using in a sport, quite frankly. I mean, you wouldn't ban Pat Mahomes just because he's too good a quarterback and you can't stop him from winning games. The burden is on teams to stop it. And I think teams are getting better at stopping it since Jason Kelce retired. I don't think the Eagles are quite as good at it since then. So, I think it's a part of the game and should be treated as a thing to solve rather than a thing to ban. Absolutely.
Yeah, like I think I discussed this previously in the pod, but I'm very much of the opinion that it's fine to have the touch push, but you have to let defensive players push defensive players. And like defensive players are not allowed to stack up and push, and it's unfair that the offense is allowed to do that. I'm fine with it as long as the defense can do it as well. But yeah, like we've hashed this out before, and I'm sure it'll be up on the docket again next year, seeing if they can get two more to swing over to their side. We've had some injuries since we spoke last. Denver's linebacker Dre Greenlaw has injured his quad. He might miss the majority of the 2025 season. Arizona's defensive back Sean Murphy Bunting has injured his knee, probably gone for the season. And Baltimore safety Ardarius Washington has done his ACL and he's gone for the season. So not great to be picking up injuries at this time of year, but obviously we'll talk about these guys on the previews quite a bit. We'll just tell you about some transactions that happened as well. So Pittsburgh have finally answered the question that everyone was asking, which was when will Aaron Rodgers sign, not if. He's there now, 1 year, $14 million contract, got a lump of incentives in there. Yeah, again, we'll talk a little bit about this here because we won't be coming to them for a little bit, but yeah, it's it kind of had to happen, I suppose. The only other big kind of moving player was Dallas have traded a 2026 third and a 2027 fifth for George Pickens and 2027 sixth from Pittsburgh. So what do we think about this? Pittsburgh, Aaron Rodgers, like he was moving better at the tail end of last season. So maybe being further away from that injury will help a little bit. He is another year older though. He got married in the off season. Maybe he's a bit more relaxed. I don't know. I still think he's a bit crazy, but I do think from the interviews that we've heard with him that he sounds like someone who's realised that this is kind of it, and I think he's trying to do a little bit of image rehab, looking at a life after football. So I think he wants to end on a decent note here, which might be positive for Pittsburgh. Like it's certainly going to be better than kind of what we've seen from for a couple of years at least, right?
You would hope so. And of course, the Steelers are a better team, a better organization. They're not a joke shop like the New York Jets. And you saw that Aaron Rodgers, even though the last season wasn't great, within a good organization like Green Bay, they kept him in check enough, even at the height of his ego, at the height of his powers, that he didn't turn into a complete disaster. And it just feels like with the Steelers and their kind of reputation for keeping things in house, it probably won't go as well as what Mike Tomlin would like it to be, but they can still extract enough football from him to be a competitive team, to be competitive enough to actually do something that isn't just going 9-8 getting kicked out of the wild card. Probably not, but enough that Aaron Rodgers can at least feel he's going out on a non-negative point, a non-negative note, because the Jets era was such a joke shop overall. In terms of his play, as you said, he was a little bit better towards the end of last season. So within the Steelers' fairly conservative offense with Arthur, with basically probably running the ball a lot and stuff like that, he'll probably be fine. But yeah, I'm not expecting him to become prime Aaron Rodgers again. And obviously with the tough conditions of Pittsburgh, it'll be interesting to see how much he'll hold up under those type of conditions as well, even if he has a lot of history of being okay with that in Green Bay and the Jets. So yeah, like I'm neither very negative nor very positive about this. It just feels like the Steelers will just grind into 9-8 regardless. And I think Aaron Rodgers is not so blown up and so bad that he's likely to change that fate for them.
Yeah, I'm not as optimistic about this. This idea that the Steelers had to sign Aaron Rodgers, I don't necessarily buy it at all. And I don't think he's an answer anymore to a problem. Like the idea is, a player of that caliber available in free agency, would you all have to take the offer. You're gonna have to bite the bullet if the alternative is Mason Rudolph. But is Rodgers actually any good anymore? Like I think we haven't seen. Certainly since post-injury, the last season was a disaster, and I don't necessarily buy that this guy at 39 or 40, whatever age he's now, is suddenly going to recover from that injury in spectacular form back to prime Rodgers. I mean, there's a big problem. There's a huge problem with his ego. Like I think that if the Jets thing established anything, is that his ego is an active obstacle to a team doing well. And if he doesn't have the talent to back that up, then I think that becomes a headache you can do without. I don't know. We don't really know what Mike Tomlin is thinking about this, but I can't imagine this is the kind of guy he envisaged for his system. So he kind of needs someone to take orders and to do the things that are expected of him, and to not try and be the guy who runs the organization. And the worry is that Rodgers, as he's shown, is capable of trying to be that guy. So I think there's a toxicity here that needs to be reckoned with, and the question of the Steelers are a better organization, so they'll be able to handle it better, I think is very much open for debate. But my biggest thing is I just don't think I think he's over that crest. We've seen with a lot of veteran QBs. Russell Wilson is an example of this. Peyton Manning, even Tom Brady near the end. You reach a cliff and you suddenly, whatever the spark was that you had that made you such a great quarterback goes away. And these guys tend to stick around just a tiny bit too long because they still believe that they're the guy. And Rodgers, he's only had the one Super Bowl, so I bet you in the back of his head is, let me get the second one like Peyton did, so let me go out on that high. But I don't think the Steelers are good enough to win a Super Bowl. And when this team is struggling at say 5-7 or something in the middle of the season and just trying to stay alive for a wild card spot, I mean, I think that's when the ego toxicity problem might air its head again, as it did in the Jets, where he became a problem once the team started to fall behind in the race for the playoffs. So I am not at all convinced this is going to work, regardless of how good an organization the Steelers are, because I think Rodgers is an old guy with a lot of weird opinions and an incredibly inflated sense of himself, and I don't think that's a good mix for the type of player that the Steelers will need in that situation.
Yeah, and I think they didn't even want Rodgers. I think there's strong reports out there that they tried to re-sign Justin Fields before ending up with Rodgers. So I don't think it's a situation where the Steelers are delighted to end up in this situation. But they're a team that's kind of been playing the QB roller coaster for a number of years now since Big Ben retired. So they're just taking what's out there, because obviously if you want to get a good quarterback, you basically have to go all in, and that's just not the Steelers' way. Just briefly on the Dallas trade, I think that's a really good fit for Dallas. We'll talk about that in the previews. But for the Steelers, I think, after trading for DK Metcalf and bringing in Aaron Rodgers, maybe having all three of those big personalities might have been a bit much. But it does leave the Steelers, as we'll talk about in the previews, a bit light at the wide receiver position. So it'll be interesting to see how they deal with that.
Yeah. A couple of teams did some extensions. San Francisco gave Brock Purdy a 5-year, $265 million extension. Ooh, expensive. George Kittle, 4 years, $76.5 million. Fred Warner, 3 years, $63 million. They also traded a conditional 5th-round pick to Philly for Bryce Huff, the edge rusher. Baltimore re-upped Derrick Henry, 2 years, $30 million. And Detroit re-upped safety Kirby Joseph, 4 years, $86 million. Baltimore cut Justin Tucker. They said it was a football decision and nothing to do with the sexual harassment allegations, or is maybe falling off a little bit last year. And Green Bay have cut defensive back Jair Alexander. There's a few other little bits that have happened since we were chatting last, I suppose. Detroit center Frank Ragnow has retired after 7 seasons due to injury issues. Indianapolis Colts owner Jim Irsay died at 65. His 3 daughters are taking over ownership, led by Carly Irsay Gordon. Obviously, the Dublin game that we mentioned at the top was Pittsburgh versus Minnesota. That's on the 28th of September, but we will not be in attendance. And the most important of all are mock draft results. The consensus won with 23 points. I came second with 21 points, and Sean and Ronan tied for third on 20 points. So very exciting stuff there. Yeah, I think the big surprise is probably Frank Ragnow. I know he's had his injuries and stuff. He's very young, though. I remember, Sean, you were on the text whenever it happened, kind of, I think, a little bit buckled that someone that young is retired.
He's 29, and it's a trend we're seeing, not just in the NFL, but in other sports too. The players now are making so much money that there can come a point in your late 20s where you're rich enough that you can actually retire, that the trade-off between this hurts all the time and I'm not recovering the way I want to, but I also have my millions, so why would I bother? It's sad because he's a very talented center, and the center is the most important part of the O-line, and the center relationship with the quarterback is such an important thing that has been talked about. Peyton Manning talks all the time about how important Jeff Saturday was to him in terms of getting things together. I think Goff losing Ragnow is going to be a big test for the Lions moving forward. How do they replace him? Does he get that relationship back? I think it's a big loss for the Lions. I think it's going to hurt them in terms of their offensive power next year. And it is just sad that a guy at 29 who probably could have had maybe 5 more years in him without the injuries has decided that it's just not. The cumulative injuries have become too much that it's just not worth it. So it's sad on that sense, but it is indicative. It is a thing we have been seeing. You see it in other, impact-heavy sports like rugby as well. Players getting out of the game as quickly as they can because they know what the long-term health issues are.
Well, I suppose on that then we will swing across over and we'll start our preview of the AFC East. So first up, we got the Bills. I'll walk us through the Bills and we can have a wee chat about them. So they were 13-4 last year. They got to the AFC Championship and they lost against Kansas City. They brought in defensive lineman Joey Bosa, Michael Hoyt, Larry Ogunjobi, TJ Sanders, Landon Jackson, and Deion Walker. On the defensive back side, they brought in Maxwell Harrison, the rookie, Trey Smith, Dane Jackson, Jordan Hancock, Derek Forrest, and Shaq Thompson at linebacker. And then they've also added Josh Palmer and Elijah Moore at wide receiver, Jackson Hawes at tight end, Darrington Evans at running back, Kendrick Green and Chase Lunt at offensive line. They lost Von Miller, Dwayne Smoot, Jordan Phillips, Quinton Jefferson, Anthony Austin, and Casey Tuchel off that defensive line. Defensive backfield lost Rasul Douglas and Kair Elam, and from their offensive weapons, Amari Cooper's gone, Matt Collins gone, Will Clapp off the offensive line is gone, and Quentin Morris, the tight end, is gone. So this is a team that we've been saying for a couple of years now is kind of close, and every year we think, is this the bit that's going to push them over the edge? They've, paid Allen now a bit more money, got him extended, so it makes sense. He's locked in. He's a great player. So now it's a question
locked
of
in and locked up, right? He married Haley Stanfield as well.
But yeah, he's mine. I saw her in Sinners. Was it? He was
yeah,
in? Yeah. She's very good in it.
Great performance.
Yeah. But yeah. So like, they're set at the quarterback position. I think that's fine. Allen will be a year older. Like, he didn't have too many major injury concerns last year, which is a positive to look at. Wide receiver, obviously, Khalil Shakir came on well last year. Keon Coleman is there as well. Dalton Kincaid / Dalton Knox, their kind of combo at tight end are fine. Like, there's not a massive standout in that group, but they're all pretty solid pieces. James Cook, the running back, is a very good lead back for them, but obviously I believe there's ongoing contract discussions at the moment. He's a bit unhappy. He wants to get re-upped, but he's holding in rather than holding out, and they expect they're probably not going to get too much movement happening on that for them. So will this offense be able to kind of get it done? Well, they've brought in the rookie to join the offensive line. They've brought in Kendrick Green as well. Darden Evans will provide a little bit of support to the running backs, maybe give them a little bit more rotation in there and stuff. It kind of just goes as Josh Allen goes, and I think the wide receiver group should be good enough, particularly paired with those two tight ends, that they should have enough through the air to keep it open. I think it's just going to come down to whether the line is able to hold up well enough for them, and like, they've got speed now, so they can stretch it a little bit more than maybe they had in previous years. And I think now I don't have the stats for me. I think that Allen was looking a little bit more accurate on those deep balls last year than he did the year beforehand. So that might be something that we'll see a little bit more of in this year. They've obviously got Babich in at defensive coordinator, and it's been an area for them where they've invested a fair bit into that side of the ball, and they haven't really had the outcome that they'd like, or the impact that they'd like. Now, given when we saw them, they were suffering from injuries, and that seems to happen on their defensive side quite a bit. I would suggest it would help if they stopped signing like players who are probably at the point of should be already collecting their retirement checks. Like Joey Bosa has had niggling injury issues forever at this point, and there's a reason that he's no longer with his previous team. There's a reason he was relatively cheap to pick up this off season. Like, I would like to have seen a few more impact players in there. Their front line is decent. Greg Rousseau and Ed Oliver provide kind of a good front to them. Matt Milano is a good linebacker. Their defensive backfield is definitely looking better with Christian Benford in good form these days. They've got the rookie Harrison to come in and challenge in there. Like, I would hope to see a little bit of a step forward in it. But like, the problem I always have with the Bills is it's just an edge kind of problem, and I don't mean like the position. I just mean they always just seem to be nearly there and then just not quite able to get it done in the big spots, and it's very hard to point to what exactly is that, because they put everything out there. Allen puts his body on the line and goes for, like, you saw the amount of rushing that he'll do just to try and keep them in a game. It feels like they've got a good collection here. I'd like to see maybe a bit more of a kind of blue chip WR1, but like overall, this is a good roster. I think probably staying around the same level as last year's, and I think all they need is just the cards to fall the right way for them to be able to push over the line. And I like it's a rare occasion where I look at something and I kind of go, well, they're reloading everything up and they're keeping everything relatively similar. Like they've kind of gone somewhat like for like in a lot of these acquisitions. Apart from, again, I will expect them to pick up a geriatric wide receiver around week 7 or so. But like I kind of am happy enough with the Bills doing that because I think they are that close, and this is kind of getting to the tail end of them being able to have this whole group together and just see if they can kind of get over the line this time, because it's not like there's a, well, you plug a running back in there and that's fixed, because Cook is a decent running back and so on. So I'm happy with it. I won't say it kind of blows me away in terms of change, but like I still look at this team, and once we get to the predictions, we'll see where we stand. But like I still see a team that's right up there and competing at the top end.
It's a strange vibe around the team as well, because like coming into the previews last year, I think they'd come out had a pretty disappointing season, so we were a bit down on them. But then last year, I think they showed that they're still the Bills, that they still got the skills, and they obviously were right up there looking to compete for the AFC, for the Super Bowl. But they're basically their biggest weakness last year, which was their defense, ended up costing them in that Chiefs game again. Once again, the Chiefs kind of their bête noire. And I kind of look at their defense, and they're, obviously Joey Bosa. I agree, I'm not a huge fan of the move, but unlike the Von Miller move, which they finally got off of this offseason, that's a pretty much a 1 year type thing. So they're not like locking up any future money with that risk. And they did add in a lot of veteran, like Michael Hoyt and Larry Ogunjobi. They're both going to be suspended for the first 6 games, but they'll bring some veteran presence there in the middle of the season, hopefully be at their best as you get into the playoffs, and offer hopefully depth in case you have injuries to their core of younger players. And the thing is, like, the players that they locked up, Christian Benford, Gregory So, these are good players. But as you say, are these blue chip players? Are these like game changer players? And when you get into these like tight games, like these games where you're trying to win the AFC title or the Super Bowl or whatever, like those are the guys that you need to step up and really get at them, because I'm not really seeing in this coaching staff a super schematic advantage. I think Sean McDermott is a good coach, perhaps even a great coach, but he's like an elite coach, someone who's like changing the game, like like Andy Reid does for the Chiefs, or evolving the game, like Andy Reid, Sean McVay, these types of offenses, or Bill Belichick and people like that did in the past on defense. Not really. They're just like good, solid unit. Basically they've turned themselves into a version of the Baltimore Ravens, which is like a really good place to be, like a perennial contender. Someone at worst is probably going to go have 8 wins if things go really bad, or if they had a bad quarterback. But as long as they have Josh Allen, are definitely going to be right in there in the thick of it. And they just need one of these years for things to go their way. Obviously, they've had years they were very close, literally 13 seconds away from perhaps going all the way. But they haven't had those coin flips going their way. And you say there's a weight of expectation on this, because this is kind of the closest since the Jim Kelly era where this Bills team feels like a genuine Super Bowl contender. I don't think if they don't go over the line, I think Josh Allen will still be venerated within that fan base. He'll be remembered very fondly, but he'll be kind of in the similar area as Dan Marino, where it's like, if only we just got over that line, if only we just got that Super Bowl done or not. In terms of their changes, as I said, like they're adding in some rookies, they are leveling in the younger guys. They have locked up a lot of the guys who are now coming into the prime of their career, so there is room for growth. But it does kind of feel like, outside of Josh Allen just being Josh Allen, there's nothing else in this team that tells you, okay, this is going to go from being a really good team, a team that has a chance in the lottery, and that can be the top 3 or 4 teams in the league or in the division. But are they a team like, say, the Eagles were last year, or like those best 49ers team, where not only was there like a great, like good quarterback situation, but there's this huge array of unstoppable talent that makes them like almost unstoppable once they go into the big games? It doesn't really feel like they're that type of team anymore. I think that time when Allen was on his cheap contract is over, and they're got used to being just in the hunt effectively. So I'm really hopeful for them. I think because they are one of those good teams like the Ravens and like these other teams that are trying to kick the Chiefs off their throne, that one of these days surely it will finally turn around for them, but maybe more out of hope than expectation. But this year I'm gonna wishcast for them with my prediction and say what I hope to happen. Whether there's actual more chance of this happening than any of the 3 or 4 seasons where it could have happened previously, the answer is probably not really, but they were really close there, so that's not a bad thing necessarily.
Yeah, where you guys talk about coin flips or small edges. I mean, I talk about a psychological inferiority complex. I mean, the fact that the Bills can beat the Chiefs in the regular season, and they've done it a couple of times now, and they're pretty well matched, and you can tell that in just a normal regular season game that they're at the Chiefs level and maybe even capable of being slightly better than the Chiefs, certainly the Chiefs version from last year. But when the chips are down in the playoffs, they just can't beat them. And I think that does speak to something that is that the Bills just, whether it is some sort of psychological holdback or they don't necessarily have the coaching to really win those very, very tough, high stakes playoff games. I think this is a team that looks like it might be destined to fall short perennially, to become, the Philip Rivers era Chargers that we've talked about before, to become the Dan Marino era Dolphins, a team that is really good and we remembered as one of the best Bills teams of all time, but never actually wins anything. And I don't think there's any changes here. This is basically the same team, right? You've essentially you replaced Von Miller with Joey Bosa, who's a very slight upgrade in terms of that veteran splash edgy thing. They've got a couple of rookies on the defensive side, Hairston and Sanders, who are getting good chatter from the Bills fan base online. So and they've done a couple of front office moves that suggest that they're trying to build stability, continuity, etc. So, but these aren't the kind of changes they need, and it's not the kind of changes that necessarily changes the dynamic of the team. The team is still Josh Allen on the offensive side. When he's in the zone, he's unplayable. When he's not in the zone, which is, to be fair, becoming increasingly less often these times, when he's not in the zone, the team just won't win. The defense is maybe tweaked up and being a tiny bit better than it has been before, but those are marginal gains, and they've always been a pretty good defensive team too. They're going to do well in the regular season. They'll probably win 13 games, 14 games, 12 games. They'll end up 1-2 at the worst 3 seed. They're in that Chiefs Ravens bracket of the best teams in the AFC, but the real chips will come when they have to go to Arrowhead in the AFC Championship game or some other playoff challenge. And maybe the thing that actually is working in their favor is that the Chiefs, if we can take the back end of last season, or at least the Super Bowl drubbing, as an indication that the Chiefs maybe aren't the force they once were, maybe that's what opens the door for the Bills. Not that they are better than the Chiefs, but that the Chiefs become worse than them. And maybe the Chiefs get, say, in the scenario that I worked through, the Chiefs get knocked out at an earlier stage and the Bills don't have to play them in the playoffs, and that's why they make the Super Bowl. That maybe is the way that these things happen. But then the question becomes, okay, they might get past the Chiefs or avoid having to play the Chiefs. Are they better than the Philadelphia Eagles? I don't necessarily think that's the case either. Like, this is a team that is maybe the third, fourth, fifth best team in the NFL, which is a very nice place to be, and certainly for the Bills as a historical franchise, it's an amazing time to be a Bills fan. But being the third, fourth, fifth best team in the NFL does not win you Super Bowls, at least not that often. Not when there are really dominant and teams who are able to get the job done who are above you. And I haven't seen anything to make me change that opinion that the Bills are nearly men who are not going to get the job done right at the end. And none of the changes that have been made this offseason have convinced me that they're a step closer. I think they're the same team as last year, so I think the worry is that they will suffer the same fate. And it's like a weird kind of being trapped in the circle of hell kind of thing, that no matter what they do, they will always lose in the playoffs to the Chiefs. And that is the fear for them, and the fear of what the legacy of Josh Allen will be remembered as, the guy who was good but just not good enough.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's have a look at what we've given them on our predictions. So I've given them 13-4 this year, the same record as last year. That gets them the 1 seed. So they stay at home throughout. They win the AFC, and I have them as my Super Bowl winner. Ronan?
Yeah, I will take the optimistic view as well. 12-5, 1 seed Super Bowl winner. As I say, they're right in the hunt. It'll be very close because I think the Chiefs will take at least a little step back and be right in there in terms of number 1 seed hunt. But yeah, like, it's such a tough division, the AFC. It's very hard to see who would win. But if they do make it all the way, they have a very good chance of winning the whole thing, I think.
So I have them 13-4, which is enough for the 2 seed under my scenario. And as I said, in my playoff scenario, Chiefs get knocked out early, so the Bills do get to host the AFC Championship game and they make the Super Bowl. But in my vision, they then lose that Super Bowl to the Eagles.
Okay, fair enough. Next up, we have the Dolphins. Ronan's going to take these guys. They were 8-9 last year.
Yeah, so the rest of this division, I don't think any of us are expecting to win. I think the Bills are prohibitive favourites, and I think, in my opinion, they're probably all around the same. But yet the vibes could not be any different. The Dolphins are obviously a team that a few years ago were the darlings of the NFL, one of the most explosive offenses in the league, and yet the last year or so they've turned into one of the most boring offenses in the league, orientated around giving dump-offs to Devon Achane and Jonnu Smith. I don't know if we're going to see much change here based on what we've seen in this offseason. So the big change that happened was probably on the offensive line, where Teron Armstead retired, a stalwart left tackle, obviously a huge hole to fill, and they basically went out and got some interior offensive linemen in James Daniels and Jonas S10E28 in the draft, but really in terms of a direct replacement for them, their best option is going to be either someone they promote from within, like Patrick Paul, or a free agency signing like Larry Borum, who's, I think he was the Bears' very mediocre type player. So you're going from an elite left tackle to, probably a fill-in at best type left tackle. That's obviously not the first place you want to be for a quarterback like Tua, who doesn't have the escapability of some of his, more dramatic peers, and obviously someone with an injury history where you certainly don't want him to get started getting sacked again a lot. And obviously part of that is probably what fed into the relatively conservative approach they took to their offense, and we'll see how much that comes up this year as well. Outside of that, really just kind of cosmetic changes. They made a big splash in the draft by drafting Kenneth Grab in the first round, but other than that, you're really talking about, in the offense, wide receivers, Nick Westbrook-Achane had a nice breakout season for Tennessee. Could possibly be that third wide receiver they were looking for many years. How much use he'll get, we'll see. Pharaoh Brown, Zach Wilson, who apparently has Polynesian descent, or is that a joke? I'm not sure. It kind of showed up in my feed there. Alexander Madison, of course, our favourite Hamilton themed running back. And then on the defense, you're looking at guys like Jordan Phillips in the draft, not to be confused with Jordan Phillips who played for, who's a veteran, Matthew Butler, a veteran, Zeke Biggers in the draft, Willie Gay and KJ Breda linebacker, who are both solid veterans who should improve that position. Ifeatu Melifonwu, Jason Marshall, Artie Burns, Kendall Sheffield, Ashton Davis and Dante Trader added in free agency in the draft. And the defensive backs, none of us are expected to be like bona fide starters, albeit they are expecting to probably get rid of Jalen Ramsey this offseason. That's not been confirmed. He's still on that team for now, but everything is saying that they want to get a trade done, and obviously for a veteran presence like that, even if he isn't traded before the season, I'd be very surprised if he's in the Dolphins by the time we get to like the midpoint of the season before the trade deadline finishes up. They did also lose Javon Holland, who was a very good player for them in his first 3 seasons, but after an injury had a bit of a fall off and has gone off in free agency for better pastures. Jordan Poyer, a veteran, Kendall Fuller, a veteran, and Saran Neal, all veterans that they decided to go get rid of and go with a more younger approach. And then on defense, they lost a bunch of very veterans as well. Calais Campbell, obviously getting way up there, but a real presence there still. Ogba, Deshaun Hand, Tyus Bowser, Anthony Walker, Duke Riley. So I think the problem with this team is that obviously they kind of went all in, right? And they still have enough pieces from the all-in era, like Jalen Ramsey, who's still sticking around, like Tyreek Hill, who said he wanted to be traded and then says, actually, no, I don't want to be traded. And it's like, because he probably realized he's getting the most money he could by staying in Miami, and a whole bunch of players like that. But yet, now they're past the fun part. They got the sugar rush, and now they're stuck in a position where they're too good to fully tear it down, but they're not good enough that you feel that they're going to get over being a mediocre team. Like, this is a team that could possibly sneak into a wildcard spot, but are they going to do anything more than that? It doesn't really feel like that's in their wheelhouse at this point, because when you look through the roster, like, yes, Devon Achane's been a great player for them at running back, but he is a little bit injury prone, so we'll see how that goes. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, like, obviously, I think Tyreek Hill probably still is a good player for someone, and I think Jalen Waddle is a good young wide receiver. We've seen that. We know that's true. But because of the way that the defenses in the NFL have evolved, they moved to a very conservative, very rhythm-based offense that was all short. Like, basically, Johnny Smith turned into like an elite tight end down the stretch because they basically would not throw it to their wide receivers on a regular basis. That's such a contrast to where they were a couple of years ago. And I don't know if that makes sense for a team that wants to be a Hollywood-type team, that wants to be an exciting team, that wants to at least entertain them. And, I don't think Westbrook-Achane is going to change that there. I think the offensive line is, at left tackle, is going to be a real problem for them. But other than that, they kind of are fine. I think they'll be okay there. Not elite, not bad, though they are relying on a few younger players there. And the defense, I think, the front end, not too bad. Jalen Phillips been very unlucky with injuries. Hopefully he can have a healthy go here. Chop Robinson, who was a rookie first rounder last year, had a good season. Hopefully he can grow into a larger role. Bradley Chubb has his own injury issues. Hopefully can get back to his form. Zach Sealer's been very good for them up the middle, and obviously they invested in Kenneth Grad up the middle. But once you get past that and the linebacker core, which is solid with Jordan Brooks and Tyler Dodson, it's like the entire defensive backfield is a huge question. Obviously I'm assuming here that Jalen Ramsey is gone. Like, they don't really have anyone that stands out in terms of their PFF grade or in terms of their performance on the field. At safety, at defensive back, at nickel back, they're just completely reliant on hoping that guys like Storm Duck or Jason Marshall or a veteran like Artie Burns can step up and fill that role. And it just feels like a lot for a team that's probably going to be struggling in many other ways. And I think, you're already seeing with Mike McDaniel in some of his early press conferences prior to OTAs during minicamp that he was unhappy, that he was getting questions and he was visibly pissed off. And this is someone who's always kind of had his heart in his sleeve, and it seems to be showing that he is not in a good place, that he doesn't think this team is a good place, and he probably realizes this is not a franchise, not an owner who's likely to give him the space to try and turn this thing around if it turns into a complete shit show this season. This is like the owner who got a first round draft pick lost because he was trying to make Sean Payton and Tom Brady a thing 4 or 5 seasons ago for his team. So I don't really like the vibes of the Dolphins. I think they have enough talent throughout this roster to not turn into a complete shit show, but I don't think this is a team that can afford to have like 6, 7, 8 wins. This is a team that isn't making the playoffs. This vibe is going to get worse year on year until eventually something's going to break. I don't know if it's going to be McDaniel or Tua or the owner or whatever, but something is rotten in the heart of Miami right now. The party is over, and now you have to deal with the hangover.
Yeah, you want to talk about teams whose windows have closed, and it wasn't even a particularly big window in the first place. I think the Dolphins, the Tua, Tyreek, Jalen Waddle thing is gone, and there's not an awful lot left to replace it. We've talked for years about how even at their best, this Dolphins team was a one-trick pony, and that trick has kind of been figured out, and they haven't necessarily found the path forward, and there's cap issues to you're a year past the Tua extension and he hasn't really justified it, and they're having to make some sacrifices now to try and see how they can move forward from this. And there's not necessarily a lot of answers in what they're coming up with, and more problems. I mean, I understand the Westbrook Achane thing is, let's try and fix the red zone problems, just try and fix the third down woes, which is a step forward, admittedly, but it does speak to an offense that is beginning to curl in on itself, right? It's not the expansive, explosive, we're going to do it all, we're the unstoppable 70-point machine of 2 years ago. It's something else, and something else that I don't think necessarily plays to anyone's strengths, other than maybe Achane at running back. And I don't think it's something that's going to light the NFL up. Either. So the offense just doesn't seem to really know how to take that step forward, and those tentative steps forward they have taken haven't necessarily resulted in a good thing. The bigger problem, I guess, though, is the defense. There's just a massive deficiency of talent on the defensive side for the Dolphins. They've really poor depth on the secondary and the D line. This is a team that if their offense isn't good enough to really be explosive, those kind of teams need to have a solid defense to at least make them competitive in games. But I don't think the Dolphins have a good enough defense. Their defense is so bad that they need an explosive offense to counter for it, but their offense is so mediocre that they need a better defense to compensate for it, if you see what it is. So both those pieces are not doing the job they need to do based on the condition that the other unit is in. So they're stuck in this weird limbo zone where they're not quite sure how to move forward, and the past, as Ronan says, the party is over, and now they're walking around wondering who's the one who has to do the cleanup, who has to wash that vomit out of that carpet. And I mean, I don't know if I don't know if Mike McDaniel is going to be the guy who wants to do that personally. So I mean, I think he may be the guy who says, "Well, party's over, time for me to move on to the next party," and that could very well be what happens at the end of the next season. So I don't really see what there is to be optimistic about the Dolphins, that put it that way, going to this season. And there's no reason to believe that any of the changes that they've made are going to find the answers that they're looking for.
You see, Sean, I'm not sure if you missed the interview, but Tyreek Hill hit them with the double whammy that he has been going to therapy and he's been going to church. So
that's the difference.
Expect big changes out of him, I'd imagine. But yeah, no, look, I've been saying this for a while. I think McDaniel looks a little bit checked out here. I think he kind of built what he wanted. We saw that kind of like the 70 points game against the Broncos when they were firing on all cylinders, and he's like, okay, so this works. But he's discovered that it's not sustainable. We can see that with the injury stuff. We can see it with how much turnover the roster they're having. Like you said, I look at this team and I kind of go, Well, there's some interesting pieces here, man. If you put a different quarterback in here, you might have a bit more of a kind of a running gun style offense thing. Like you could say the back end of this defense is atrocious. I'm not sure about their line, to be honest. So even with Achane there, I'm not sure how much that's going to work. They'll really need the rookie to step up. Like it's just a bit of a mess. And like you said, I wonder if it is one foot out the door for the coaching staff, because if they knew they were here and they were locked in and they were looking at this as being a rebuild or looking at it on a longer term trajectory, like they would have been selling some of these pieces. Like Tyreek Hill wouldn't be there anymore. He would be traded for assets. Like you probably would have them looking at like heir apparents to Tua, because like let's not forget we're only a year and a half detached from like should Tua even play anymore with all the concussions he's getting and the injuries. Like this is not a sustainably built team in a scenario where I think they're looking worse than they were last year, and I don't see any vision of where they're going with this apart from let's just see if it runs this time, kind of like driving a car until it can't pass the NCT anymore, and this thing is just waiting for the test date. Um, yeah, on that cheery note, I suppose predictions. I've got them going 6-11, good for 14th in the AFC.
Yeah, kind of similar. 7-10 for me feels like a relic of the explosive play era. We're in a much tougher NFL, and the Dolphins aren't ready for it.
And I'm 6-11, 11 best team in the AFC.
Very good. Next up is Sean. He's going to tell us about the Patriots, who had a 4-13 season last year, but maybe found some players to build around.
Yeah, it's the end of the Gerard Mayo experiment, but we're still very much in Belichick land. The shadow of Bill still hangs over the scene, and the Pats are making one last attempt to get the band back together in some sort of configuration, and maybe try and build something around this incredibly talented QB that they've somehow stumbled upon. So changes that are in the big one: head coach Mike Vrabel, who took the Titans to a number one seed in the AFC, but never really went much further than that. Brought in Josh McDaniels is back for some reason at OC. Terry Williams in at DC. In players wise, on the O-line, rookie Will Campbell has been brought in. Also Morgan Moses and Garrett Bradbury. So an attempt to bulk up the talent on the offensive side to protect their young guy. Also on the offensive line, Jared Wilson as a rookie. Wide receiver Stephon Diggs, who I think is the big question mark about this Pats team. I mean,
cocaine.
Well, no, that was just pink sea salt. What do you have?
Let's just stick to even just the on the field question marks. Let's leave the what was that substance question marks to another day. We also have the addition of Kyle Williams, a wide receiver rookie. Mac Hollins has been brought in. Trayvon Henderson as a running back, and Josh Dobbs as emergency backup QB when they get desperate mid-season. On defensive side, Milton Williams on the defensive line, Carice Tonga, Josh Farmer as a rookie. They brought in Harold Landry and Robert Spillane as the kind of the big names on the linebacker. Levon Chasen as well, and then in the back end, Carlton Davis, Marcus Epps, and the rookie Craig Woodson. So not there's talent that's been brought in certainly, and there's certainly a new vision going forward. Leaving them, Jared Mayo, Alex Van Pelt, and DeMarcus Covington on the coaching side, Davon Gutcho, Dietrich Wise, Daniel Ekure, Jawan Bentley, Sion Takatiki, and Johnson Jones on the defensive side have gone. O-line, David Andrews, very sad that he has finally decided to end his time. Okafor on the offensive tackle. Jacoby Brissett is gone, and Joe Milton. So the big change is Mayo out, Vrabel in. So we're still in Belichick mode, but they want a little bit more experience in their team. They want a guy who's proven that he can actually coach an NFL team and that he can move things forward. It's the Patriot way, but it's a more proven version of the Patriots way, I guess, is how we have to think about it. So on this, I mean, I am a little bit optimistic about this as a thing. I think Vrabel has shown in his time at the Titans that if he's in a situation where he doesn't really have to care about the offense that much, in the Titans, it was just let Derrick Henry do his thing. Here it could be just let Drake May do his thing, and he can focus on shaping a defense. Then it does work. He can produce good teams, and we have seen him do that. And we have seen him do a situation where, as the Pats kind of have at the moment, when you don't necessarily have the most talented defense personnel-wise, he's been proven to be able to create more than the sum of its parts on the defensive side. And I think there are pieces of this defense that can be shaped into really good players. Christian Barmore, who I've always talked up as being the guy you could build this team around. A lot of love for him this season from Pats fans. Christian Gonzalez has shown in moments that he can compete at the top end of the secondaries. I do have some love for Kyle Duggar as well. So I think there's talent there. It's not an explosive amount of talent, but we have seen that Vrabel can be the guy to pull those things out. So there's a blueprint there that we can see the blueprint, right? It's Vrabel builds a solid, reliable, occasionally good defense. And then on top of that, you've got the offense doing just enough to win games. And to me, that does sound like it's a more coherent plan, I guess, than what they had under Gerard Mayo. I think there's a more solid foundation than the 4-win season to work upon. And if they can find a way to maximize Drake May as a talent, that's absolutely brilliant. The questions, however, are on the offensive side, because I think there's two big questions that we have to ask ourselves. Firstly is Josh McDaniels the answer at offensive coordinator? Is he the guy you want leading your young quarterback to glory? Or is he a guy who just happened to be around when Tom Brady was around and is still living off that legacy? I would be inclined to think that his record since he left the Pats suggested he might be more in column B than column A. And I mean, the thing about the Titans offense is that, you relying on Derrick Henry, you don't necessarily have to scheme that up a lot. You just go, Derrick Henry, go get us 2,000 yards, and he'll do it. With a second-year quarterback, maybe he might need some guidance, Maybe he might need to be able to take that next step forward, and we don't necessarily think Josh McDaniels is the way. The other question mark is Stephon Diggs, right? Like, on paper, at his best, this guy could be the explosion, the veteran explosive, the guy who brings that Pats receiving core to a better level, right? He makes people like Kendrick Bourne and Demario Douglas work harder. He opens the space that allows Hunter Henry to exploit it. He becomes the guy he was 3 or 4 years ago at the Bills. But is he that guy? Is he that guy anymore? Even taking off the off-field stuff, which doesn't necessarily speak well, or the way his personality became a problem at the Bills near the end of his run there. Is he actually still got what it takes? I don't think we've seen that for a while, and we have to see that kind of make that step forward for me to believe in. So, to me, I believe the defense will be good. And I believe that Drake May will be good and will certainly be better than, say, a Mac Jones or whatever. And I understand the idea of trying to evolve out of the Belichick era into something else. Maybe they maybe should just have a clean break and try something new. But if they're sticking with the Belichick era, then picking the one guy from the Belichick era who's actually proven that he's a good coach is the way to go with that. So I want to be optimistic, right? And I as a result, I picked them to win 9 games this year, which I was surprised. I thought I would be way out of my own in making that prediction, but Connor seems to be with me there, and maybe he can explain his reasoning for that. I appreciate that's the top end of what the Pats are capable. This is not a 10-11 win team. This is a maximum 9-win team. But I want to believe they can do that, because I want to believe this is the way forward for the Pats. We can build on that. And I think we've seen just enough out of all the various pieces that are being put in there to put the little doubts about McDaniels and everything to the side and go, Drake May plus a Vrabel run defense, that is a team that most other NFL teams aren't necessarily going to want to play on every other Sunday. So benefit of the doubt for now, but if they end up winning 5 games, I will also be like, yeah, I could kind of see why that would happen.
I think the biggest positive that will come out of 24 season is that Robert Kraft touched the stove, as it were. He put his man in, Gerard Mayo, who he'd been cultivating internally for multiple years, and it turned to a complete disaster. And the fans started getting angry, and the fans started, to some extent, not showing up. And he was probably looking at the future season ticket sales, and he obviously pulled the cord and has brought in Mike Vrabel. But I think, Robert Kraft, there are reports that he always felt a little bit jilted, that obviously Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, mostly Belichick, kind of took a lot of the credit that he felt should be him for kind of leading this successful organization. But I think we figured out, like Robert Kraft, your best job is just stay out of the way, avoid massage parlors, and stick to trying to hire people who can run this team for you. This is not a team that's going to be made conjointly with you. I think Mike Vrabel, when he ran Tennessee, was given a lot more control than the average head coach. He's someone who runs the organization, and while I think the modern NFL, it's usually better to have a kind of more holistic approach to running an organization. If you are going to run this more old school approach, I think Mike Vrabel is one of those few coaches that would be willing and capable of doing that. And yeah, I think if you're talking here over multiple years building the Titans, but now they have Drake May, albeit maybe they don't have Derrick Henry, that's probably a team that could have won that game that they managed to get the number one seed in and got past that Cincinnati, because Drake May is such a big positive that you just need to make sure he has a better season. And I think that they prioritized the offensive line because there was more opportunities there in the first round early on. They got Will Campbell. Morgan Moses is just the perfect average right tackle to just bring your offensive line up to par. Garrett Bradbury was cut by Minnesota, but he's a solid center. He's an improvement over what they had there. And then are the weapons great? No, but if you wanted to get a big new weapon, you basically had to go out to the trade market. You would have had to mortgage the future, and this feels like a team that's happy to go, we'll do this the slower way, the right way. Year one's about betting in the system, betting in stability, and showing progress. As long as Drake May has a better year, which wouldn't be hard given how much of a disaster last year was, basically in its entirety, then the fans will probably be like, okay, we'll give it another year. And then next year is maybe when you make the big move in the draft or free agency or the trade market to start putting the elite explosive weapons, then get the most out of this kid, Drake May. And on the defense, you're putting a lot of faith that they've kind of changed things overhead, brought a lot more Mike Vrabel's guys in. I think they're going for more of a speed type approach than the kind of more power approach in the Belichick era. So there will be some of these veterans that are leaving that don't suit the new system. But I think we've seen with Vrabel that he can build a good defense. We'll see if it'll ever be elite, but it'll be solid there. So yeah, for Patriots, I'm not as high this year, but I get the vision. And for a team that has a bad owner, having at least a head coach who understands that and can build something around the organization to get them to a stable path makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I don't think the Patriot way is coming back and they're going to start winning Super Bowls every season again. But they need to stabilize and get back to being a reasonable team that has some dignity, because the last few years have been pretty undignified. Probably as dignified as Bill Belichick's love life these days.
Yeah, I look at this team and, like I said previously, I see it as a team that's probably on the up again. I think they found the quarterback. That's good. They've brought in beef to protect the quarterback. That's good. They've cut bait with a head coach who wasn't up to snuff. That's good. Mike Vrabel is not going to blow anyone away, but is good. Like we said, the Titans were the most boring team in the world, but they made the playoffs all the time. I don't understand the Josh McDaniels thing at all, and I'd actually be frankly concerned about the development of Drake May with him. But hopefully they'll just kind of go, well, you just run the operational bits and don't mess him up too much. Let him speak with. I presume he's maybe kept his quarterbacks coach or something like that. But yeah, just overall, it just felt messy. It felt like the team, while not great last year, wasn't living up to their own building. Yeah, yes, it wasn't a great roster, but it wasn't a 4-win roster last year. It was probably a 6-win, maybe pushing for 7-win roster. Add 2 to some of the improvements they've had, and you get to 9 wins. I'm not expecting it to be earth-shattering, but I've got 9 wins getting them into the wild card, and I just think it's a team that won't amaze you, but will give you a bit of hope. They are somewhat pinning their hopes on. I think they do need Stephon Diggs to play decently, and hopefully he hasn't gone too crazy. I've been off the Stephon Diggs train for a few years now, and increasingly looking more and more correct about it. But price point you got him, the fact he kind of knows what his role has to be here, and I get the sense that it's a ownership that would happily cut bait rather than put up with this shit. So he kind of will be forced to deal with it. I think it should be fine. But yeah, no, I just think progress, and then as Ronan said, maybe next year is the one to shoot up. So yeah, so I said I've got them going 9-8, good for the 7th seed and going out in the wild card.
Yeah, as I said, slower build for me, 7 wins, 11th in the AFC, but as long as Drake May has a good season and they aren't a complete disaster, then I think the fans will be happy enough to give them another year to see if they can turn this into something, as I said, having a bit more dignity.
Yeah, just to flag on the QB coach thing, they brought in Ashton Grant, who was the Browns QB head coach during the Sean Watson years. So maybe not the most ringing endorsement there, but the talent of the kid will probably pull them through anyway. So 9-8, but that's not enough for the playoffs in my scenario. That's the eighth best team in the AFC.
Very good. And finally, we've got the Jets. I've got the honor of talking you through them. So last year, 5-12. Obviously, a lot of things going on throughout the year. We saw mid-season firing of the head coach. We saw Aaron Rodgers kind of uh, seize control is probably the best way of looking at it. They brought in his guys. They decided they just need to clear the whole lot out. So they got rid of Bob Saleh. They got rid of Jeff Ulbrich, the defensive coordinator. They got rid of Nathaniel Hackett, the offensive coordinator. Obviously, Rodgers is gone. He's off in Pittsburgh. Adams is gone. They've changed up the line as well. Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses are gone. Wes Schweitzer as well. Two of the tight ends, Conklin and Yeboah, are gone. And on the defensive side, we've lost DJ Reed, Ashton Davis, Brandon Eccles, Chuck Clark, Javon Kinlaw, Solomon Thomas, Lecky Fotu, Hassan Reddick, and CJ Mosley. So a lot of turnover coming out off on that side. But in replacement, they brought in Aaron Glenn, obviously coming off a very good tenure as a defensive coordinator with the Lions prior to this. He brings in offensive coordinator Tanner Engstrad and defensive coordinator Steve Wilkes. They win the Justin Fields sweepstakes that were between them and Pittsburgh apparently. So Justin Fields 2 years, 40 million. He's their quarterback. Aman Membu, offensive lineman, is the rookie they picked up to kind of bolster that. As I said, they lost a few, so they also brought in Josh Myers and Okafor as well. To support the wide receiver core, they brought in Josh Reynolds, Arian Smith is the rookie, and Mason Taylor, the rookie tight end. And then on the defensive side, kind of like I said, a lot of rebuilding needed there. Brandon Stevens and Andre Sisco at defensive back alongside Azari Thomas, who's a rookie, and Malachi Moore, who's also a rookie. And defensive line, they brought in Tufele, Nadi, Cowart, and Jamin Davis at linebacker. So obviously this is a full-scale rebuild for them. I kind of like the culture fit that Glenn has brought so far in his interviews and so on. He kind of feels like the take no nonsense. I believe he's got them doing prayer now at practices as well, which I sent you guys on that joke that I do agree with wholeheartedly. I would normally keep religion out of it, but the Jets might need God's help on their side. You've still got talent on this roster, though. As much as this is a turnover of a lot of pieces, like Breece Hall is still a good running back. Garrett Wilson is still an excellent wide receiver. Maybe there's question marks behind that, and they got a lot of camp bodies in there for it. A quarterback, it's obviously not a long-term solution for them, but they've got Justin Fields and they got Tyrod Taylor. So Fields flashed when he was at times, but lacks the consistency. His accuracy isn't really up to NFL level, but he's got legs. He's exciting, and we saw like he was successful in that. Was it 5 games he got with Pittsburgh last year, where like he played well. They won a chunk of those games. They weren't even playing to his strengths massively. They've brought in the rookie tight end Mason Taylor, and obviously we know that Fields loves throwing to his tight ends. For anyone who had Cole Kmet those seasons with Chicago, and like I can see it working a bit. I just don't see it all clicking all at once. But there's upside to it, and you can see them kind of establishing pieces that are then interchangeable. So you can, if you get your chance at a quarterback next year, you bring him in, you plug him in, or you've got like kind of a soft starter in front of them to work away. Because this is a team that's ownership bent over backwards for Aaron Rodgers. Brought in Aaron and traded for Aaron Rodgers' friends, allowed essentially Aaron Rodgers to dictate who was going to be coaching him. So anyone who's been in this locker room, you see there's a lot of turnover, also need to think, okay, this is a change in approach, a change in ethos. Like, this isn't just one guy, the quarterback doesn't like me and I could be out of my ass or whatever. So it's a big rebuild, but I think Glenn will do well at that. Fields obviously gets a decent paycheck. He's going to be looking to establish himself as, potentially a starter, if not a high-end backup somewhere around the league. He's got a good WR1. He's got a new tight end to play with. They've got an okay but not great line in place that they've tried to bolster a little bit. So, I would say this is more set up for him to have success here than it was necessarily in Pittsburgh. I don't think Pittsburgh and Arthur Smith in particular wanted to play the kind of football that Fields wanted to play. So I do think there's a chance for him there. And obviously if they can use his legs a little bit and maybe, do some stuff with running backs in the back, that could work quite well. And then this defense kind of went off a cliff last year, but they had just fired their head coach, who was a defensive head coach, who, you would imagine probably had a fairly decent hand in that. They've still got some decent players here. Quentin Williams on the line, a decent linebacker core, and so on. Sauce Gardner has kind of fallen off since his first year or two, but the potential's still there. I wonder if some of that was motivation, and I do think the whole Aaron Rodgers power play took a lot of heat out of this locker, out of this squad, and I wonder how much of that might change around now that that's a little bit better than it was beforehand. But it is, temper your expectations, Jets fans. This is a rebuilding year. This is a year where you're going to turn over a lot of your roster, start to establish practice, establish routine, establish kind of how things are going to work moving into the forward. Aaron Glenn is here for a 3-4 year kind of roster turnover, and it's not going to happen this year. I do have them improving ever so slightly over last year, but not much, not enough to cause any ructions. But I think their target for this year should be to not be a team that everyone is circling on their calendars and saying, well, that's a win, right? And I think they're going to start to get there by the end of this year. They're not going to be there yet, but you're going to be like, oh, they're doing this a lot better. Or like, this defensive back scheme is working better than it was beforehand. Or, oh, look, the offense is a little bit more dynamic. So I think you'll see positive moves, but it's not like you're going to move mountains in one off season.
Yeah, I think the sense we're getting from this AFC East preview is that you've got the build and you've got three teams in rebuild mode. But all in different phases of the rebuild mode. The Dolphins are in rebuild mode, but aren't willing to admit that that's where they are, and they're maybe call it year zero. That maybe next year is when they actually commit to the rebuild. The Pats are in maybe year two of the rebuild. They've tried the first step, it didn't work, so now they're tweaking it and moving forward. It feels like the Jets are in year one of the rebuild. They tried the exciting thing that could have won them a championship if it worked, and it crashed and burned massively, and cost the job of a talented, promising head coach, alienated the young talent that they had, and hamstrung them around this egotistical guy past his prime. And now they're trying to, well, okay, that was bad. Let's see if we can start to rebuild from the ground up. And it's a modest rebuild. I mean, I think the Justin Fields thing is you're right. It's a very modest move. It's like, we just need someone to fix this bit, someone who's good, but isn't going to be too expensive, and maybe isn't necessarily going to be fought over by 20 teams in the league. Then we got to lean on the talent that we have. So you got Hall and Wilson on the offensive side, and all the defense pieces that you talked about. And let's just try and take 3 or 4 years to rebuild this. And it's smart. I mean, it's the Jets, so you can never be sure it's actually going to work, and they may just get stuck in some weird limbo where they're a 5 or 6, 7 win team for a long time. But it's certainly a plan, looking at it in the cold light of day, that is less hopeful than the Rodgers thing, and more grounded in reality, right? Here are our limitations, and here's the things that we can achieve if we work on it. The defensive side of things is going to be interesting, because obviously you've got Salah and Wilkes did a kind of weird job swap thing where Salah is now back in San Francisco and Steve Wilkes has moved into the Jets thing, and how the Aaron Glenn, Steve Wilkes relationship works. I mean, it's always that weird thing when you have a coach that is heavily weighted to one side or the other. How do they deal with their respective coordinators? So how does Aaron Glenn and Steve Wilkes, how do they share out their responsibilities and work forward? Neither of them, Steve Wilkes was maybe a little bit disappointing as a 49ers defensive coach at times, given the talent he had, and Aaron Glenn produced a fairly decent but not entirely spectacular Lions defense from the pieces that he had. So it's interesting to see. I think, as you say, there are pieces there. People like Sauce Gardner have a lot of talent but haven't shown it yet, and they've got talent on the defensive front that can work for it, and they've got the young kids on the offensive side. So they could beat a few teams. They certainly could shake a few things up. They're going to be a difficult team to play in certain scenarios, and if they get in the zone, they can certainly take a few scalps or two. But I think it's a very consciously. This is not a team that's expecting to win 10 games. Not a team that's expecting to get anywhere close to the playoffs. I think they if they end up with 5 wins again, or they end up with 6 wins again, they'll be happy. I think stabilization in the idea of moving forward in the future, with now they've improved the cap situation. That they've opened up a little bit more room on the cap moving forward, and now they can maybe work upon fixing their roster deficiencies, building a more talented unit, and then working towards some sort of culture shift thing, building from the ground up. I think that would be a success for the Jets. It may not look like a success if you're like a casual Jets fan and you're watching your team lose 12 games and you think, oh, it's all the same, this team never gets better. I think you could have bad 5-win seasons like they had last year, and I think you can have good 5-win seasons. And I think this is more likely a team's going to end up with a good 5-win season, or maybe even a win or two more than that.
Yeah, I think, Connor, you hit the nail on the head. I think dignity is basically what this team needs to regain. If for no other reason that the unhappiness was seeping out of this team by the end of the Aaron Rodgers era. You had like Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson especially Sauce Gardner making like basically public comments saying, what the fuck's going on here? This team's a complete disaster. So I think given that those guys are now reaching the point where extensions and stuff will come up and they have the money, but are these players going to be motivated to actually sign on the dotted line and kind of be the nucleus of this team, given how they were basically cast aside for a couple of years to let the Aaron Rodgers clown show take over? And I think, these guys are talented. I think we all agree Breece Hall is a great running back. Garrett Wilson has a wide receiver 1 upside, and possibly, or has shown being a wide receiver 1 is in his wheelhouse. Like Sauce Gardner was a rookie of the year. So these guys can go up there, and there is plenty of talent otherwise. Like Quinnen Williams is still a great defensive tackle. Jermaine Sherwood was a breakout candidate last year at linebacker, and this offensive line is really young and quite good. Like John Simpson's the veteran and probably the best player consistently so far, but Olo Fashanu, who was their first round pick last year, was solid filling in for the Tyron Smith when he went down with injury inevitably. Armand Membu they picked in the top 10 this year, so they're hoping he can fill in a right tackle. Joe Tipman and Elijah Vera-Tucker are both high-end young guys who, Vera-Tucker in particular has injury issues, but when they have played, they've been very effective. So if you've got a good offensive line and you have 2 good playmakers, then the hope is that you don't need to have Justin Fields turn into, Aaron Rodgers or prime Aaron Rodgers. You just need him to turn into being a competent quarterback. I think Justin Fields is never going to be a great quarterback. I think his long-term trajectory is probably going to be close to his backup, Tyrod Taylor, where if he can turn things around, he could become a solid, the guy always kind of been shifting around as maybe the starter, high end a backup, low end starter, because I just don't think he reads the field well enough to ever become that elite quarterback. But he has the underlying raw material in terms of obviously his athleticism and his arm that he could turn into a great quarterback if he's given the right tutelage. And then Tanner Engstrand, who came from the Lions, maybe he can get that Jared Goff magic and get his confidence back under him and get back up. But I think you guys are more right where, this year is about re-establishing this team as a serious team, not a joke shop, and getting these young guys invested in this project for the next 3-4 years, because the guys are there, the talent is there, they can build on it obviously in future years, but the nucleus is there to build a good team. They just need to get out of their own way and stop being such fucking idiots about it.
Yeah. So I have them regaining composure, but not really being reflected in the end results. So I have them going 6-11, which is only a one game improvement over last year. Good for 15th, but showing signs of improvement.
Yeah, 7-10 for me. As I said, it's probably as much about how they play as how many wins they get, because I think the damage that was done there the last couple of years might take a year or so to fully wear off.
Yeah, and I'm 5-12, which is 13th best in the AFC. But as I say, there are bad 5-12s and there are good 5-12, and what they're aiming for is a good 5-12.
Yeah. Okay, well, I suppose that'll wrap it up for the AFC East preview. Will we break the illusion this time around? We're going to record 2 of these back to back, so I'll ask you what you're doing next week after the AFC North preview. But I suppose that'll wrap it up for now. So until next week to the listeners, until about half an hour for us. It's bye from myself, bye from Ronan. Bye from Sean. It's been all 4 quarters. Thanks for listening, and we'll chat to you next week.